Hello viewers, this is Angela Murjani and I hope you've been having a very good day today because I'm here to present an 18th century poet and painter called William Blake, who hailed from England. A self-confessed mystic and seer, Blake was a profoundly religious man who had some extraordinary spiritual experiences in his life. Given that he was so deeply religious, it becomes very easy for us to comprehend that the poem A Poison Tree is based on fundamental biblical principles. It appears that the main theme for this poem was inspired by a scripture which is taken from the book of Hebrews, which occurs in the New Testament, and Blake often refers to chapter 12, verses 14 and 15. Now, these scriptures contain an injunction, and this injunction says that every person is responsible for being at peace with all other men. If he is not at peace, if there is anger or resentment in his heart, then the onus is on him to resolve that issue. And if he still insists on holding on to that anger and resentment, then it's going to take a deep root in his heart and become like a tree which gives forth poison, affecting not only his life, but the lives of all the others with whom he is in contact. The speaker in this poem tells us about how on one occasion he was angry with his friend, but he was able to be honest with his friend and discuss that point, and so the air was cleared and all ill feelings disappeared. On the other hand, the speaker tells us that he was also angry with his foe, but this time he did not talk to his foe, but instead he hid his anger and he nurtured that resentment until it became a huge boiling inferno on the inside of him, and it turned into a poisonous thing which brought death to the enemy. Which brings us to the second scripture that was the inspiration for Blake, which is taken from the Gospel of Matthew, the 7th chapter, verses 17 to 20. Now, this scripture says that just like a tree, a man can only be known by his fruit. In other words, when ordinary people like you and me who are not botanists, we look at a tree which has only green leaves and branches but no fruit, we cannot tell what kind of tree it is. However, a botanist might be able to do so. It's the same with people. When we see fruit on the tree, we can recognize the tree. We can say, oh, there's an orange, so this must be an orange tree. Same way, when we look at the evidence in a person's life, are they speaking good things? Are they doing bad deeds? We know their character. So this second scripture tells us that unless we examine the fruit of a person's life, we cannot tell what they are like on the inside. William Blake was born in London in 1757, where he spent most of his life except for a brief stay in a small seaside town. Blake was an unusual child who from an early age spoke of having visions in which he saw God, he had conversations with God, and on one occasion he even saw a tree filled with angels. Initially, his parents didn't believe him. But in time, they had to concede that Blake was a child who was different. Hence, they did not force him to go to school, but they allowed him to learn to read and write at home. He was also very keen to learn how to paint, and so very early in life, Blake began to both write poetry and paint. Blake also composed tunes to his songs, and he would sing them to his friends. And his friends all commented that they were exceptionally beautiful songs. Blake believed that all art should be inspired by an inner vision and not by logical reasoning. And therefore you can see that the outcome of his poetry is mostly deeply religious and mystical. And it is for this reason that many people thought that Blake was an eccentric man. In 1784, a year after he published his first volume of poems, Blake set up his own engraving business. Many of Blake's best poems are found in two collections, the Songs of Innocence, published in 1789, to which he later added in 1794 the Songs of Experience. The complete collection was entitled Songs of Innocence and Experience, showing the two contrary states of the human soul. Blake's categories are a mode of perceiving human life in two separate phases. Innocence corresponding with childhood, a time and state of protected, untarnished innocence, though not always free from the wicked ways of the world of experience. Experience, on the other hand, was characterized by the loss of childhood innocence and marked by the corruption that enters life through various agencies that one has exposure to, agencies like society, politics, and religion. Generally speaking, the Songs of Innocence deal with the more positive and brighter side of life, whereas the Songs of Experience deal with darker and more pessimistic aspects of it. Blake's intent in writing about these two contradictory sides of life seems to be that you need both sides in order to present the whole truth. In another context, Blake said that without contraries is no progression. In other words, what he meant to say was that innocence cannot have the complete picture of life because it lacks the knowledge of experience, and experience is tainted because it has already passed through innocence, and therefore experience too cannot have the complete picture of life. The problem is that once we have traversed into experience, we can never go back into innocence. There can be no retrogression. So what Blake is saying in this particular notion of his is that you need a combination of both. You need some of the qualities of innocence. You need its vulnerability. You need its gentleness. At the same time, you need the knowledge and the wisdom of experience. Put the two together and you get a more composite and comprehensive view of life. The poem A Poison Tree is found in the Songs of Experience, and as such, it reflects the more evil and sinister side of human life. The central metaphor of the poem is a tree, and it stands for a very fundamental truth about human nature. That is, that if we are angry and we are able to speak it out, it clears the air and everything is all right. Relationships are restored. But if we hide our anger, if we bury it inside of our hearts, and if we nurture it, if we feed it with all kinds of crafty things, then it's going to grow into something poisonous which will eventually bring death to us. Blake's poems, because they are deeply spiritual, are very much like the parables that Jesus used in the New Testament in order to tell stories that were vivid and picturesque, in order to teach a spiritual truth that would have a dramatic and lasting impact on the hearers. Now let's get right into the poem A Poison Tree. A Poison Tree by William Blake. I was angry with my friend. I told my wrath did end. I was angry with my foe. I told it not, my wrath did grow. And I watered it in fears, night and morning with my tears. And I sunned it with smiles and with soft deceitful wiles. And it grew both day and night, till it bore an apple bright. And my foe beheld it shine, and he knew that it was mine. And into my garden stole, when the night had veiled the pole. In the morning glad I see my foe outstretched beneath the tree. The opening stanza of the poem is deceptively simple but unforgettably memorable. In those 4 lines, the poet makes hardly any changes in words or in grammar, but yet the meaning is completely different from the first 2 to the second 2. I was angry with my friend, he says. And then he says, I was angry with my foe. Same emotion, but the person at whom it was directed was very different. They were at two opposite scales on the poet's range of emotions. One he liked, the other one he didn't care for. In fact, not just not care for, but he actively disliked him. He hated him. And this leads us to a very central truth about human beings, and that is perception alters the way that we deal with people. When we like people, we treat them differently. When we don't like them, we've made up our minds that we don't want to have to deal with the issue at hand almost before it began. The opening stanza is both deceptively simple, yet unforgettably memorable. The poet talks of the same emotion. He says, I was angry with my friend. Then he says, I was angry with my foe. Same emotion, yet the people towards whom this emotion was directed were at two extremely different points in the range of the poet's emotions. One he liked, one was his friend, one he actively disliked because he was his foe. Now, when the poet talks about this anger, he's not talking about the sudden outburst of anger that we all experience from time to time. Now, just the other day, I was standing in a queue at a supermarket for a long time. And all of a sudden, when it was about to be my turn to pay my bill, a lady came and first she got her elbow in beside me, and before I knew what was happening, she had elbowed her whole body in front of me, and she was in front of the counter before me, although she had only just shown up. Now, I was angry, but that was a momentary spurt of anger, and that is different from the anger which Blake is talking about in this poem. Here he's talking about a sinister, evil brooding that we keep holding on in our hearts, and we keep adding on to it as time goes by, sometimes even plotting and thinking about how we can get revenge on the person whom we have so actively disliked. In this very first stanza of the poem, we come across a really important point about human life, and that is perception. The way we perceive people alters the way in which we deal with them. When we like people, we are often predisposed to be kind towards them, to be forgiving towards them, and to make excuses for them. But when we don't like them, then we are harsh and judgmental, and we rationalize our ideas of revenge and hatred for them very easily. Everywhere all over the world, people have their own pet groups whom they love to hate. They will call one group of people, oh, these people are so lazy, or those people are so stupid, or some other group of people is very aggressive. And towards these people groups, we have already made up our minds whether we are going to like them or we are going to dislike them. The thing is in human life that when we set up our minds to dislike people, we also set ourselves up for a worsening scenario. Just to show you how important perception is and what a big role it plays in the way we see things, I brought for you a picture here. Now, what do you see? I think that you are seeing a frog, right? But that answer could also be wrong, because look at it this way. What do you see now? Do you see a horse? And this is just to tell you that perception can change the whole picture. That's how when we like somebody, we are ready to make every excuse in the world for them. But if we dislike them, then we are not willing to understand them at all. In stanza 2, we are not told what is growing, although we can guess that it's a tree because we have just read the title of the poem. We can assume that a plant of some sort is growing, and further, we even figure out that this is not a real or a natural plant, but that something which is standing as an image, perhaps for wrath, which is mentioned in the last line of stanza 1. Now we know that a plant in the natural needs to be watered in order for it to get nourishment. And in stanza 2, the speaker says that he watered his wrath with fears and tears. which means that when we have a dislike for somebody, we build up a scenario where we imagine that we need to be afraid of that person, or we think up another situation where that person has caused us so much of sorrow that we've been crying over what they've done. And that's how we nourish that seed of hate which has been planted in our hearts. The speaker says that the watering was done night and day, which in other words means all the time. Now, if you think about this realistically, how true it is. When we have had a fight with somebody and when we are angry with them, we think about that scene all the time. Inside our heads, we have a video recorder in which we have recorded everything which happened, and we press the play button again and again and again. The next time we press play, we notice more. We say, oh, look at their expression. Not only did they speak rudely, but watch their hands. We stop, we rewind, we play it back again. Night and day, day and night, we want to rewind and see those scenes and hear those words in our mind again and again. All we are doing, the poet says, is providing nourishment for that tree of hatred to grow deeper and deeper on the inside of our hearts. Blake uses even more natural images. He says that plants need sunlight. And just as plants need sunlight to thrive, hatred thrives on false smiles and wiles. Even though we don't like somebody, we pretend that we do. When we see them, what we want to do is bash them in the face. But what do we actually do? We smile and we say, "Hi, so nice to see you." These are the deceitful ways that we use, which the poet says are like sunlight to the tree of hatred. They help it to be strengthened and to grow more and more. The smiles don't stem from happiness, but instead they are a mask that we use to hide the real feelings which are hidden on the inside of us. In other words, the pretense that we put up actually helps to fuel the hatred which is in our hearts. Everybody knows this. This is a truth that's commonly understood, that when we have negative emotions and we bottle them up on the inside, one day they will explode and come out, and we won't be able to control them any longer. Which takes us back to the basic premise that Blake uses in this poem, that's taken from the book of Hebrews, the 12th chapter, that if we allow anger, resentment, and hatred to grow in our hearts, then it will affect everything, because it's like a poisonous root. If any of you has ever tried to take a weed out of your garden, you will know how difficult that is, because the main root grows lateral roots and they kind of hold on to the ground and they are not easy to pull out at all. So the longer we take to deal with hatred and anger, the harder it's going to be for us to root it out of our lives when we eventually decide that we want to deal with this situation. In the third stanza, the poet says that at length the tree grew to bear a single fruit, and the poet describes this fruit as an apple. The mention of the word apple takes us immediately back to the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, which is spoken about in the Bible. Now, when God put Adam and Eve in the garden in the book of Genesis, the story tells us that they were forbidden from eating from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. But can you guess what they did? Of course, they did eat. Now, the Bible does not say that the fruit of that tree was an apple, but yet for time immemorial, the apple has always been a representation of that fruit. So when we see that the tree of bitterness and the tree of hatred has flowered and there is one fruit on it, and that fruit is an apple, it immediately takes us back to what happened in the Garden of Eden. Now, we are told that whenever Adam and Eve ate that fruit from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, it brought sin into the world. Everything wicked and evil came in at that time. the eating of an apple or a fruit was not an issue, but the real issue at hand was their decision to make a choice to do exactly what they had been forbidden from doing. The fruition of that action of choosing to disobey God and the fruition of what happened on the tree in the heart of the poet both come together in this one image of the apple. The scripture declares that their act of disobedience caused all kinds of evil and wickedness to enter into the world. That includes anger, wrath, and jealousy. Hence, the apple that appears as the fruit of the tree of bitterness and anger in the speaker's heart is a symbol of the evil that came as a consequence of Adam and Eve's act in the garden. The full fruition of the act of Adam and Eve and the complete fruition of the buried anger in the heart of the poet come together in that one image, that image of the poisonous apple. It stands for evil coming to its fullest point, both in Adam and Eve, and so also in the heart of the speaker. Just as Adam and Eve were fully aware that the fruit on that tree was not meant for them, so also the foe of the speaker knew that the apple belonged to the adversary. Yet, the poem tells us that he saw it and it looked very attractive to him and he desired it even though it was not his, but it was his adversary's. Eventually, the adversary plucks the fruit and he eats it. He falls down and he dies. Of course, he has no idea that the fruit was a poisonous one, and so he ate it unknowingly. The enemy of the speaker, the poet seems to suggest, is malicious in the extreme. He is wily and sly. He operates under the cover of darkness. This stanza tells us that the pole star, which is normally a very bright star, was hidden. Now, the pole star was such a bright constellation in the sky that in the days before compasses were invented, sailors often looked to the sky, to the pole star, and they were able to navigate their ships even out of storms by using this one pole star for direction. But the poet tells us that on this particular night it was so extremely dark and dismal because even the pole star was hidden. We don't know how, but perhaps it was hidden by fog or by cloud. Under the cover of this extreme darkness, the foe was able to operate. Now, even night is an image when we are considering it in a poem. Night is the absence of light. Light stands for God, and in the absence of divine direction from the stars and in the absence of light, evil is able to run its full course. So in this dark night, the evil machinations of the adversary come into full play, and he comes in there and steals the apple. In this ominous atmosphere, evil is able to do its worst. Unhindered, unchecked, evil operates and brings about the death of the foe. The results of this act can be seen in the light of the next day. In the light of the day, the speaker looks and sees that his foe is outstretched beneath the tree. He has died from eating that poisonous fruit. But the biggest surprise is yet to come. It is highly significant that this scene takes place in the garden of the speaker. Earlier we were reminded about Adam and Eve and their disobedience and the price which they had to pay for that act of rebellion. It happened in a garden. Likewise, this act also of the enemy happens in a garden of the speaker. When the speaker tells us that he is glad, it shocks us because immediately we are made aware of the inherently evil nature of man. Not only is the speaker not sorry, not guilty, has no remorse for being responsible for the death of his foe, he is actually feeling triumphant. He is victorious and he is gloating over the death of his enemy. This is really shocking to us because it tells us how human beings have degraded themselves from being noble creatures to being people who will experience great joy even in the event of their wicked plans coming into fruition. The fruit of the poet's bad attitude towards his foe now becomes obvious for all to see because it is out there, it is exposed, which takes us back to the scripture which was also foundational in this poem from Matthew 7, where that scripture tells us that a tree can only be known by its fruit. You see, there are seasons even in the growth of a tree. And there are seasons in our lives too when we can actually hide all the negativity that is inside of us, and no one might be any the wiser. No one may know what's actually going on in the inside. But then there comes a season when that tree of evil will begin to bear fruit in our lives, and our true character, our true nature, what we are inside will be obvious for all to see on the outside, because a tree shall be known by its fruit. Perhaps some of you remember when you were very little, you heard the story of Snow White and the 7 dwarfs. Now in that story, a similar incident happened. There was a stepmother who was very jealous of her stepdaughter Snow White because she was so beautiful. And out of her jealousy, she made many attempts to kill Snow White, to take her life. And when all of these attempts were unsuccessful, she finally went to Snow White with an apple. And that was a poisoned apple, which again represented her hatred, her jealousy, her maliciousness towards this beautiful and innocent young girl. And when she gives that apple to Snow White takes it in all innocence and she bites into it and becomes unconscious. She would have died except for the fact that this is a fairy tale and fairy tales have happy endings. But in real life, often endings are not so happy, and if we don't watch out for the consequences, what Blake is trying to say is we will face similar tragic circumstances in our lives if we don't quickly and hastily resolve all situations which are unpleasant with those with whom we have contact in our lives. The poem also suggests what experts we have become at masking our real feelings. Very often we may be feeling something on the inside, but the way we behave, the words we use, our gestures may hide those true emotions from the people that we are interacting with. But the poet seems to caution us that it won't be long that we will be able to hide these true feelings, and they will come out in the due season. Just like a tree which will show what fruit it has on the inside, so also our lives will eventually display through our words and our actions the people that we really are. The poet also gives us a strong warning that every negativity that exists in our lives must be quickly dealt with, lest it become like the poisonous fruit which killed the foe of the speaker in the poem, a poison tree.